Welcome to this tutorial on building a 3D first-person shooter game in Java. Today, we'll walk through the entire process starting from project setup to implementing critical game mechanics. First, let's set up our Java development environment. You'll need JDK installed as well as an IDE like IntelliJ IDEA or Eclipse. Next, we'll set up a new Java project. Open your IDE and create a new Java project named FPS Game. Inside the project, we need to add a library for 3D rendering. We'll use LWJGL, which stands for Lightweight Java Game Library. Visit the LWJGL website to download the latest stable version. Once downloaded, configure your project to include LWJGL. If you're using IntelliJ IDEA, go to File - Project Structure - Libraries and add the LWJGL jars. Now, let's create the main class of our game. Right-click on the SRC folder, create a new Java class named Game. Inside our main method, we are going to initialize LWJGL and create a window for our game. Now, we have a blank window set up. Let's add game graphics now. We will use OpenGL commands for rendering. In the loop method, let's clear the screen and render a simple color. Now run your program. You should see a window with a beautiful teal background. This is our game window where we will render all our graphics. Next, let's create a simple player model. We'll define a player class to manage our player's properties, such as position. We will create an instance of the player class in the game class and move it around. To do this, modify the loop method to respond to key presses. Now, run your game and try moving the player with the W and S keys. You'll notice the player's position changes. Next, we want to visualize the player's movement on the screen. To visualize the player, we'll draw a simple cube using OpenGL commands. Add the following method to your game class, drawPlayer. You'll also need to call drawPlayer inside the loop method to render the player cube each frame. Run your game again. You should now see a red cube representing our player in the game world, which you can move using the W and S keys. Now we want to implement more features like collision detection. For this, we'll start by creating a simple ground plane. Call this method in the loop to have a ground plane rendered below the player. This will serve as the floor for our game. Now, let's implement the collision detection for the player cube. Add the following method in your player class to check if the player is on the ground. Now modify the player's movement to only allow upward movement if the player is on the ground. Test your player's movement now. The player should remain above the ground unless you allow them to jump, which we'll implement next. To implement jumping, you need to modify your player class. Let's add some gravity and jumping height. Next, add a key callback to handle jumping. Don't forget to call the player.update method in the game loop. You'll notice that your player can now jump and fall back down due to gravity. Next, let's add aiming and shooting mechanics. Let's create a bullet class to represent the ammunition our player will shoot. Now we need to keep track of bullets that are shot. Modify the game class to hold a list of bullets. Next, implement shooting in the key callback listener. In the game loop, we should update and render bullets. First, update their position. Now let's draw the bullets as well. We can render the bullets as simple spheres or cubes. Make sure to call drawBullet for each bullet in your loop. You now have bullets that can be shot in the game. In a real FPS, you might want to add a target to shoot it next. Let's create a target class to represent our shooting target. Now let's add a target to the game by creating an instance of target in the game class. Then in our game loop, we need to draw the target. Now run your game to see the target rendered in your game world. You should get creative with how you manage targets and their positions. Next, let's implement a simple condition to check if our bullets hit the target. As your game evolves, you might want to add different layers of complexity, like enemies, scoring, sounds, or animations. Always ensure to test thoroughly. Before wrapping up, let's talk about enhancements. Consider adding features such as UI elements, health systems, advanced AI, and sound effects. To finish, be sure to play around with the ideas introduced here. The more you experiment with new code and concepts, the better your game will become. Thank you for watching this tutorial. If you found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and leave your questions or suggestions in the comments below. Happy coding!